afternoon. I understand all of you will be from security background. So things I'm going to talk about will not be new to you. Just want to throw these three security numbers and check with you if you can share your thoughts what they will be representing. 5, 80 and 3. Sorry? HTML, alright. Port number, alright. Right. Okay. Right, I see your familiar face there. I didn't know ONGC was also here. All right, so this is more of the industrial trend. Essentially, what we have is that today you have 80 million attacks originating every day, causing almost $3 trillion of losses, and you can hire somebody to launch a security attack for as low as $5. Right? So these are some of the trends that are happening, and why is it happening? The sophistication of attack has gone up, right? We have high volume, veracity, and variety of attacks happening because of platforms like artificial intelligence and machine learning, which are accessible to the attackers. Also, what has happened is in recent times, all that DMZ model where we had put firewall, IDS, IPS within the office network is basically getting challenged because employees are working remotely, right? They're working from home, working for travel, so data is got deep parameterized. And for those who have adopted cloud, the data which is in excess is also sitting outside of cloud. And hence there are a lot of security solutions which are managing. So not just security, but also managing security tools. So it's become a complex world. So as been introduced, my name is Sanjay Vaid. I am a CISO and CISM, certified SOC analyst, certified incident handler, CMA level 7 consultant there, and have been doing this work for a while. I'm also ISO 27001 auditor. 27005 auditor, internal auditor as well. What we are going to cover are the trends in terms of what's happening in the area of SOC per se. And then we will go into the SOC. We'll look at what is security operation includes of, and what are various things within the SOC which are there. Then we will discover the incident handling process, look at what are the new evolution in SOC that are happening, and then we'll share some point of view and then wrap it up. The content is large because of the time which we have, which is reduced. I'm going to skip some of this content. One thing which we have seen, there is a recent directive from NCPCI, National Critical Infrastructure Protection, and from CERT-In that all critical infrastructure, in fact, all companies in India have to inform CERT-In within 6 hours of any security breach. It's a law now. And of course, we have to retain logs for 180 days. And a lot of misconception we are seeing is that people believe having a SOC is the end and means of everything. That's not the case. We need logs from endpoints, we need logs from network, we need logs from identity and access management solution, we need logs from the OT. SOC is an aggregator, right? So I'm just keeping that as a baseline because SOC can only manage what it has visibility to. If you do not have logs coming in from an area, it will not have any measurability or metrics for it. So let's look at trends. I'm sure all of you are using SOC and will have exposure to SIM. However, over time, the SOC operation has have new solution like SOAR, which is Security Orchestration and Automation Response, UEBA, and then we have devices, the BOID devices, which are going out of the network, which also has to be protected. Some form of cryptography coming in there. Applications, a lot of use of SAS, statistical application security testing, dynamic application security testing, fuzzing, runtime application security testing. And then as one of those, some of those who are going to cloud, what I'm also finding out is that we are still looking at the solutions for our email security or for data security, which are applicable for on-premise. They're also getting changed. They are no more applicable in terms of the world of cloud, which is shadow IT and shadow data, where you have a OneDrive where people can also upload when it comes to and Office 365 email account. So you do not just have an email, but also a whole ecosystem which is coming alongside. But what's happening from the SOC? So traditionally, we had a SIEM where we were doing monitoring and looking at and some maturity came in with some correlation where we were doing various activities happening and consolidating them to get a view. However, one thing which has happened in last at least 5 years is social engineering. All of our employees, or most of you, should be carrying mobile phones, right? And you will be carrying them inside your organization as well. Some of you, these mobiles will be provided by the company, or it will be your personal. However, you will be accessing internet, you will be accessing emails and other things on your phone. And this device will be going into unsecured areas as well when you move out. And then you are also, compromising the organization. Another element which we found by doing intelligence work for various organizations is that a normal thing which we believe by having the name of the admins, the phone numbers available on the website is a fodder for the recognition space of the Lockheed Martin kill chain. If I was an adversary or I was an advisor, I would first look for administrators, the people who have the key to the kingdom, right? Once identified, you would like to then find out about who they know, so that if you are sending a spear phishing email, that person is more susceptible to accept. In fact, it has gone more advanced. You have bots now available to speak in the way they speak, etc. So social engineering is a big cause of worry. Countries or states who are sponsoring social engineering, apart from the syndicates, are going to various sites. In fact, some of our companies have their information up for sale if you do intelligence services on deep dark web. I see Gail also sitting here. More familiar faces, and who better to know about what I'm talking about than Gail itself. All right, so that's another thing. Then we have identity. With this whole factor of work from home and remote working, our offices have become boundaryless, right? We do not no longer protect what we have, not just in a premises, but also where the employee is. And it's a task in security operation then to identify the person who is accessing the information is the person who claims to be. I just saw the session before this on zero trust, right? So we have this concept because now we also have to monitor for factors whether this person who is logging in from the remote location is the person who is claiming to be and has all the security controls, even if the person is to be, is not compromised one. So what we also have to look for now is identity and access management. Another thing which has happened with application and with DevSecOps is the factor that you have security in everything, right from the planning stage to development stage to the testing stage. Activities which were done towards the right have moved left, right? So the whole CI/CD, continuous integration and continuous development, has to be monitored. And the indicator of compromise, the IOCs which we monitor, are quite different than the infra indicator of compromise which we look for. So the SOC operation would now have to look beyond the traditional indicator of compromise and the playbooks in these areas. And identity access management, privilege access management, along with the cloud, multi-factor authentication, single sign-on, have become an important area. Another important area is governance risk and compliance. The regulatory compliance in terms of data privacy or in terms of data retention, etc., or the industrial compliances which we are subjected to, are something which we have also to be monitored. That brings us to the sophistication of the attack we are dealing with. Most private companies will be dealing with the middle level attack. So we have three categories. I don't have to inform you about that. You know that they're recreational actors, they are syndicates, and then the state sponsored. Your sector, which is the government sector, will be predominantly targeted, at least in current times, by the state sponsored attackers. With high degree of motivation, finances, and skills available to them, the sophistication of the attack will be much stronger, and that's what we have to be prepared for. Security operation management, and most of you will know, but I am presuming that some of you might still want to hear, so that we can bring everybody on the same page. Constitutes of various factors. We have the security infrastructure, which is the infra, the apps, the cloud, the IoT, etc., which we have to look at. Then we have the vulnerability penetration, and then we have the compliance, the security baselining, regulatory compliance, industry compliance, and the standards which we are adopted, those to be seen. And the security operations is continuously monitoring for any deviation in this, and then bringing in the detect and response functionality in there. Now, security operation further has two more facets to it. One is security situation awareness. We don't just look at an incident per se, but we look at the holistic view of it in terms of the environment in which it is occurring, and then look at the monitoring aspect of it. And with this, the whole awareness of this security awareness and the event, we do correlation, and then we do the incident response, and for which we have a dedicated SOC. We do this by taking up the first step, where we bring in the threats, look at the threat source. This is what typically in this special publication 800-30 looks at in terms of how and why the SOC process is. So we look at the threat source, which are from insider or from the various malware or the targets which we are exposed to, the indicators or the likelihood, which is what we calculate, and we'll look at it later in this, and the events, the sequence of events that occur, and then accordingly we look at the likelihood and the exploit which is there. What we then look at, despite all the controls in terms of endpoint, firewall, IDS, IPS, etc., which we have, what are the vulnerabilities or the gaps which we have in the network, which are further compromised, leading to an incident, and that particular incident, what is the risk we are exposed to, and then we do the risk acceptance, risk mitigation, and then come up with these formulas. Basis the previous step, we look at the risk. Now, risk has the old school of looking at it from your own perspective, and there is another perspective of the adversary. Now, our perspective was predominantly based on our assets, but what is important to us might not be necessarily important to our adversary. For example, information about admins, for example. We, under RTI, put all top information up in the internet, but that might be fodder for what our adversary is looking for. It might not be confidential information from our perspective, but might be a very highly sought after information as the first phase of Lockheed Martin kill chain to get information. So, from the threat into vulnerability into cost, today we're looking at the likelihood of the attack, because we have limited resources, or we can't have infinite resources and limited time. So we need to put our time where it matters. So we need, if something is not likely to happen in our risk scoring, we will rate it accordingly. Multiply it with the consequences, multiply it with the severity, and then where you put it high, extremely high, medium or low. So that's one change that has happened in how you look at the attack vector. And the level of risk, we look at consequences into impact. Further again, we look at the annual loss expectancy. I'm sure all of you do this, which is the annual rate of occurrence into the single loss expectancy. And if the ALE is less then the risk, then you accept the risk in the risk register. If it is more, then you obviously put the control. So I'm sure you do this calculation. Return on security investment is ALE into mitigation risks minus the cost of the solution divided by cost of solution. But this is more for private organizations. Again, the risk assessment becomes very important in terms of how do you look at this. So the various 4 steps in this particular area is you prepare for the assessment, and then you conduct the assessment, and within this assessment you look at the threat source of the event, look at the vulnerability, look at the likelihood, and then determine the risk. Once you have these processes done, you ensure that this is communicated, and then you do it regularly. Now, why this is there, that some of you might be using ISO framework, some of you might be looking at NIST framework, and some of you might be looking at IEC 62443 as well. But it has to be done periodically to see the risk score and evaluate it basis on the previous year. As I mentioned earlier, SOC is as good as the number of security controls you put. So whether it is the security controls in your endpoint, and that endpoint constitutes of the laptops, PCs, handheld devices you have, and the traditional solutions like email security, the encryption, and the antivirus and EDS have got also disrupted. For example, if your organization has moved to Office 365 or is in the process of moving to Office 365, solutions which were previously used might not be effective, would not give you the logs, neither have the security capability to do any effective security control. So we need to look at it from the context of the solution or the overall architecture where you're moving in. Similarly, if you are looking at network side of it, and you want to adopt SASE, Secure Access Service Edge, or Zero Trust, and you know that the user is going to go off to his home or travel and still use so you need to have 2 policies which smoothly switch off and switch on between remote access and access from the office, and you need to have monitoring accordingly for those devices which are there. And of course, security for the cloud has its own nuances. Some of you would have adopted cloud, some of you would be thinking of adopting cloud, some of you would have adopted cloud but possibly Office 365, and some of you are still thinking of doing so. Either of the cases, you need to ensure that you have cloud, of course, is a third party who is going to process your data and handle your data. Data still is owned by you, and you need to ensure that the security architecture and the security of the cloud itself is secured to start with. So we have right tools for cloud security posture management, CSPM, which are having its own quadrant in ranking. And then if you are looking at applications which are going to be on the cloud, so you still have to have security solutions looking at those applications and the identities and the keys on those. And then if you are going to have users accessing the cloud, so we need to have Cloud Assurance Security Broker or CASB solution put in place. But it has essentially, the point is that the logs which is coming to the SOC will also have dependency on the logs that is the log sources. So if we are having log sources which are meant for on-premise solution, and you are somewhere going to the cloud, it has to be appropriately. Otherwise, the security tool which you have in place might not be giving the logs which are required. So SOC, we all know, is a centralized unit looking at correlating various events which are coming in, identifying any anomaly within the event itself, or correlating multiple events, and then accordingly raising an alert for incident response. What we have is we have inputs coming from various sources, and then we have data where we do contextualization, do normalization of the data, correlate the data, and as an output, we have the analysis where the logs are then further looked into by collecting, normalizing, indexing, putting into data, and then further correlating. The process as such moves from logs coming from various sources to an incident handling team, where various sources of information is correlated and identify whether it's an incident based on the priorities which we set as a P1, P2, P3, P4. The SOC analyst either gives the ticket to an incident handler to handle this, and if it is not a security incident, then he sends it back, and the security handler further investigates, handles the ticket, and reports this. The components within the SOC in terms of the various teams are the business, the people, the process, technology, and the services. The business becomes very important. Eventually and essentially, we do everything which we do is for a mission and vision of the company. So how the whole process is aligned with the organization mission and business is very important, and where we need to look at security consideration becomes very important. One of our customers business team, when we were doing contract, suddenly came up middle of the contract and said, we are looking at data analytics, and that becomes a very important aspect for us. So what we need to do is, beyond whatever you're doing in security, bring in the aspect of data analytics, because as such we have become more of an IT company than a product company as such. So it becomes very important what the business need. People becomes very important. So we have the CISOs like you who are there. We have the security incident handlers. We have the SOC managers. We have the monitoring team, which is there. We have the process, which becomes very important. The whole SOC process, how the shift happened, how the logs are collected, and most of you will have a multi-environment where you have a multi-vendor environment where somebody will be managing infra, somebody will be managing SOC, somebody will be managing application. How the handshakes takes place and how security, when this handshake takes place between the vendors, is taken into consideration. So process becomes very important. Technology becomes as important. Traditionally, people are used to using SIEM tool. However, now the new age SOC or SOC 3.0 and 4.0 have technologies such as SOAR, technologies such as UEBA, further infused in them to ensure that the SOC is more prompt. And then the kind of services in terms of monitoring, incident response, forensic, and so forth and so on, we provide as such. The typical SOC involves the business process, which constitutes the report preparation, etc. And the technology process, which is logging in the incidents, logging in the response or forensic services, operation aspects, how we do the shifts, employee training, and then analytical process in terms of how do we identify incident, escalation, ticketing, etc. Here we also bring in various metrics in terms of filtering. How much data or logs is something which we are going to retain, monitor, the volume of tickets, etc. The types of SOC which we look at are the in-house SOC or the internal SOC, which most of you will be used to or will be having, which is a captive SOC on-premise. The other is an outsourced SOC, where a service provider provides you from its premises, the monitoring is done from their premises, and they offer the incident handling as well. And then there is a hybrid form where we have the same in your premise, but the monitoring and incident response or monitoring can be done from your premise, and the incident response can be done from the service provider premises, or in a reverse fashion. These types of SIEM, we have the in-house SIEM, which we are all used to. It has its own benefits and its own limitation. One, of course, benefits is you have control on it. The limitation there is that you are locked to the skills you have within the organization. The cloud-based SIEM, which provides you a lot of benefits. The whole manageability is done by the service provider. A disadvantage is you might not be able to leverage it as much as your own SIEM. And then you have a managed SIEM, which provides you all the benefits which you would have in on-premise. However, it provides you the leverage where you can use the skills of that managed service provider sitting in different parts of India. right? And have that thing to your disposition, and also bring in the best practices they learn from the other customers they have, which otherwise will be just limited to your own organization. SOC maturity model, we use various frameworks and models to do the assessment of SOC to see where we are. We have typically 4 levels of SOC, SOC 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. We'll look at it. So essentially we have the first level of SOC where we do the correlation, and the next level where we do bring some form of orchestration, automation, and then the third form we bring UEBA, and the fourth form we bring analytics. The various models will include CMM, SOC CMM model, COBIT model, various NIST frameworks, and SSE CMM, security, system security capability maturity model, which we can use. I'll give it a pause here. I've been told I had 60 minutes, so I've been doing a marathon in this, or trying to sprint it out, but any questions so far?
Mentioning about the logs. If we are going to get the logs of all the endpoints and other things, the server or the storage capacity will require the operational overhead will require to large. Because these application logs and other things are available in the system itself. That we have to bring all the logs to.
So there are two parts of it. One is a real-time log monitoring, and there is an offline monitoring. Offline, you keep it for audit purposes or for forensics, right? But you need not have to bring all the logs, right? You bring a sample of the logs for that purpose and retain it for that purpose, and you do filtering out of it. That once you have defined the capacity of logs you want, then you do filtering, because even for assessing it, you can't do the assessment of all logs, so you'll be doing filtering. As per Government of India guidelines, of course, we now need to have retention of the logs, but then you can define, the parameters for how much logs have to come in, or the threshold of the logs that come in, and the filtering policy, which defines how much is the capacity for storage. But you should be having it for compliance reasons and for offline monitoring purposes, where we do audit for logs and.
Logs will be available with the system. And for also they will be available. But they have to keep it offline again.
See, the logs for the events, you don't have to have all the logs, but if there is if you define, let's say, an indicator of compromise, and that is an alert that is generated, then you want those logs to be retained. And now you have to, if there is, within those logs, there will be a lot of data, then you have a threshold which you keep for that, and then you apply filtering on top of it. But you don't have for all events. It's a security alert which the indicator of compromise has found out. And obviously, the other thing which I was talking about, this person here, the third person here, who is doing the validation of the SAP list 1 and SOC list 2, these are the people who are going to first identify whether that particular log that has come as an incident is actually false positive or true positive, right? Once he identifies that, then you have to take a call, because you do want to do the eradication. Obviously, you will have P1, P2, P3, P4. So if it's a priority 4, you will set 4 hours, 8 hours, 16 hours, 24 hours. But then you still want to monitor, because you will again have a passive and an active kind of attack. A passive active kind of attack is at your face, you know it's a malware. Another one will be a camouflage, right? So you want to do forensic of it if the attacker is trying to divert attention and is already, it's a ransomware kind of situation. Ransomware, we did a recent study on Oil India attack. It took 45 days for the attackers to get inside them. 45 days once inside. So the attackers was inside their organization for 45 days. So if this forensic would have been done, and we would have analyzed that particular user within the organization, or that particular, because before he's uploaded the payload, he would have established a command and control. Now we had to identify that kind of a scenario. So what you do in the audit or forensic later, in offline mode, you go more deeper. First you eradicate that incident, right? But that fourth person who is making a note of this thing, he is going to make a note at the end saying that this has to be audited. Now if you have to audit it later, then you have to have that record. But you can do those user techniques which are there in terms of filtering and putting the upward capacity. uh, in order to decide how much logs, what kind of logs, what threshold of logs, and the log filtering technique, so that you don't have huge storage capacity needed. And then there are also service providers for that, but obviously Government of India might not look at them. But we have to use the various techniques which are there for logs. So I hope I answered, and we can talk more later.
I had Office 365 job. So can we request logs from them, from the cloud service provider, if we get into these jobs? Like we recently are pushing them.
You can put your own agent. There are agents. That's why I was saying in the beginning that the solutions which we were using earlier for on-premise are not effective, right? For example, if you are an Office 365 and we were using, let's say, an iron port, that version of iron port Cisco might not be meant for this. So there are different solutions from the guys in Gartner Quadrant like Proofpoint and all that, who are meant for this solution. So these will not give you those logs itself, because when we are looking at Office 365, it's a whole, for the lack of word, universe. Because if I take an Office 365, I would have OneDrive also, right? I have other applications also. Now, user can have a personal account of that also, and he can upload file, and you will have no visibility. So, is it the only solution you need? No. Yes, sorry, because till date, when we had email on Outlook or Lotus Note, the server was in our premise. So the only thing could have happened is that some spam mail or a phishing mail could have come, right? Now the indicator of compromise have gone way ahead. The first indicator of compromise is governance. How do you know what data is going up and what data is coming down? Then you need some solution like CASB, Cloud Assurance Security Broker, to do the monitoring. Once you have done the governance, then you need to see who has the access to what data, what is not. So whitelisting and blacklisting of application has to be done. Then comes the part of the spam. Then comes the part of phishing. So the indicator of compromise have gone wide. And then comes another element. This guy is going to go home also, use his emails on home also, and not come to your data center, go to Office 365 directly. And there is a new element which has come post-COVID is user experience. Because one big elephant in the room that has come in COVID is internet. Now it is not your LAN or WAN. It is the internet is what is home through which he is accessing. So if you route the traffic through your data center, there will be latency. Another elephant which has come in the room is video calls. The firewalls and the whole infrastructure was not meant to have this much of load of data coming into them, right? So there will be failures because they were supposed to be meant for taking care of data when they were planned for. Now the applications that are floating to them are different. So there is a new concept called split tunneling. Split tunneling is that there is a direct peering with Microsoft. There is a direct peering for traffic meant for your data center, and there is a different peering which is done for a point-to-point VPN, and different peering which is done for internet access. So what is happening with that is your load balancing, IDS, IPS, and firewall are the endpoint. So you have this zero trust solution and secure access service edge solution or framework coming in. So this completely disrupts the school of thought of which we had, which is a castle model that we have a the DMZ. DMZ to chab chalega when the data is inside it. With cloud, Office 365 data is sitting in Microsoft. User, if it is going out of Office and accessing this data, both the user and data is outside a premise. Neither of them is going through your DMZ. So you need a completely different solution. And what will SOC know if the logs are not coming? So right tools have to be adopted, new tools have come. So this whole thing is going through an exchange called internet. And that exchange, the architecture, another element has come is user experience. So in your architecture design, if you plan to do it the traditional model of going to data center and it will go to Office 365 and then it will have video call also, latency will be there and user experience will hamper. So then this brings us to this factor that we have to reassess and adopt new frameworks. And within those frameworks, we have to do an as-is analysis, do an end-state architecture analysis on how would this framework look like with adoption of this new framework like SASE, Zero Trust and all that. And then what are the tools that are required for that? And then we have to have logs for it. Because indicator compromise बनेगा कैसे? हम तो spear phishing और उसको देख रहे हैं. the fundamental answer to your question, I give a long answer because I wanted to bring this perspective. But yes, you can get the logs, but then for that you need that agent, use security agent, which is the right agent sitting there, which can look at cloud assurance security broker, or from the perspective of shadow IT and shadow data, because this Office 365 is beyond emails. It is having shared drives and other things, and also to the fact that Microsoft will be giving the user also his own personal account also. So how do you define, because यहाँ DLP भी आ गया, that what data is going to his personal account, right? And I demonstrated this to one of our public sector client on CISO on his table by his own laptop, showing him how this will be going and what employees will be doing across the company. Because this is possible, and no, you have no many, because DLP is supposed to look at the port here, but this is only happening on the browser and to a legit application that Office 365. So that's the case. But you can get this thing, but you have to have the right solution. So I'll go forward. This TTP is important. We all know this, the techniques, tactics, and procedures, and it's important because if we know that, like an example, it's also TTP example. The same thing hacker will be also doing. He has to look at the tactics, or we need to know what are the tactics this guy is going to adopt, in order to gather information from you. And when you hire people like Big Four consulting firms, the first step they will do is also look at this: where is your data sitting? Before they do any penetration testing, they will first look at the key personnel in the organization, where all the data is residing. Even very simple things like LinkedIn account, your vendors have the architecture shared to glorify their accounts, and that is picked up. So if we get those traces, then we are able to make mitigations. Then the techniques which are used, so Lockheed Martin kill chain, he will find out the user, he will know the people he knows, and the person will try to send email to that person and then establish command and control. So we try to study that and eradicate those steps. And then similarly, procedures, he is going to do the potential entry points, the potential vulnerability and all that. And that also obviously calls in for immediate action on how do you, once you've done a vulnerability scan, is it enough, or you need to do 2 stages of vulnerability scan. One is a scan, and one is the next step of remediation, and then do a 3rd scan. A lot of companies don't just do vulnerability scan, but do vulnerability management as a service. And there are a lot of solutions now which gives you a track on when was the last vulnerability found, and what is the age of the vulnerability, 50 days, 100 days, 200 days, and when it got resolved. Because finding vulnerability is one thing, mitigating the vulnerability is completely different thing, and more you scan and more you find, it'll only be compilation of logs. So attack is the goal or the motivation, plus the method and the vulnerability. Not everybody will have a goal because of monetary gains to attack you. Some might have a country-based goal, or some might have motivations in terms of information theft, or some might have goals of financial loss. So we need to understand what goal is there and what are the TTPs and vulnerabilities that are there. Indicator of compromise, we all understand, and that's what we need to regularly update. This becomes essential because we can't have a playbook which is created and we leave it. So this playbook has to be updated regularly. New indicator of compromise have to be there. Just to give you an analysis, in 2005, 95% of the attacks were from outside, so they were malware attacks. In past 3 years, the analyst reports, if you go through, 60% of the attacks are from insider. So the indicator of compromise essentially has to be from inside. So that's what the answer further comes in. Now, how do you do the insider attack? The insider attack is that you do passive monitoring. Now, active monitoring is for any malware through the IDS, IPS, any rule break. How do you do the detection of a disgruntled employee or a compromised account? Now, there you can have an active scanning, but it's very hard to detect because advanced attacker will clear their footprint, right? So you do the analysis. So you bring data lake or UEBA, user enterprise behavior analytics. What do? You have the logs of the user for 6 months, right? And then you then do the fingerprinting of the user. Is there an anomaly of user behavior? Because there might be a legit, because whoever is taken over the account of that user will have done study on the user if he is an admin.
So the unfortunate part is that though we call it an insider threat, but actually sometime earlier, during the recce or some, when we could enter, outsider has put some partial or something, and then he has acted to the user ID of someone inside it. And that is true that we have to do that scanning every day.
Correct. Correct. And then there is also bots and there are machines. Yeah. So machine, you will not be able to collect information in 6 months. You will have to do it for seasonality. 6 years. So if you're an oil and gas company and you want to see if there is any compromise with your machine or bots, then or any change in this thing, you have to see what was that in the last year. Is there a pattern? So you do seasonality index. So for seasonality index, you have to have the logs of a whole 1 year and then compare it to this year and then see. Humans is obviously you can do it a shorter period and understand if there's an anomaly. But then you have to have new indicator of compromise. In COVID, a lot of indicator of compromise changed. People were working from home, their behaviors changed, their patterns changed. So if you're using a data lake and you wanted to see any anomaly, there were many anomalies. And the worst thing you can have in SOC is too many false positive comes in. And your time getting wasted in resolving false positive and true incident, because you will have same level of people, right? So, however, this becomes very important. This becomes very important, the Lockheed Martin kill chain. We talked about these phases, we all know these. And this is where the whole priority of tickets come into picture. The reconnaissance phase is where the data, the adversary is going to study, right? He might be standing outside your office, he might be standing outside your home, or if it's a part of a country which is outside, have sharing border or outside this thing, he will be looking at your digital footprint, right? Studying you, creating, honey traps, and there are various cases of such who will either try to reach you through Facebook, LinkedIn, other places, and social engineering, or take over the account of somebody and collect information through that means. But it's very essential from that aspect that what we think is obvious of sharing our information, our organization data, and most of the government organization has information about people, their roles, their phone numbers, their email addresses. You just need to link one to the other. Link who is talking to whom, what are they talking in social media, and you can figure out that this guy is, and there's a proper study and the machine learning algorithm. In fact, there is one Government of India organization which is in the power sector, and one company called Recorded Future, which is into intelligence of security, performed a threat intelligence on them and gave the report to the minister. And it was found most employees' accounts were compromised, and their people they knew their accounts were compromised on social media as well. And then that particular organization set up a centralized security team apart from the security team which they already had. So it's the most lethal thing. Once the reconnaissance phase is done, they know who they have to target, then they will do the weaponization. They will prepare a package, you look at Colonial Pipeline or the Ukraine attack. If their goal is to, let's say, go into our OT system and take over control or compromise the security of that, let's say Stuxnet kind of situation, then they will have a payload which is going to work accordingly, do a lateral movement, or have multiple payloads. For example, they also want to do DDoS attack on top of this attack, or take over control of some system within the OT environment and have a lateral movement. So they will do that, and then they will have delivery of that payload through spear phishing, email, or some other means. Then they will exploit this, communicate, and with set up the command and control, and then obviously exfiltrate this. This becomes important because the last two stages is where you have the level 4. If somebody is able to reach communication and command control, and this has to be dealt with priority. So your SOC team has to prioritize the incident handling accordingly, the quantum of tickets that are going to come to them. So if it's a port scanning is the first phase. So he's still trying to find out about your organization. So it is the first phase, you will be low priority. If it is malware infection, it's a medium stage because it's most likely the delivery of attack is still not past this stage. And if we are looking at distributed denial of service, then it's high because then they have infiltrated. So they are into the fifth stage or the second last stage of this thing, and they are already inside the organization. And it has to be dealt in priority. And then if you have unauthorized access, it's a medium this thing. This is again where they're trying they're trying to get established the connect. Insider breach is high. That means the account has been compromised, and that's where the incident has to be handled on priority, and so forth and so on. So these are the priorities which we deal with in our tickets in handling. Of course, you bring in the previous factor, which is the calculation I told you about ROSI and ALE. So this becomes another important factor in terms of risk level metrics. So apart from that, you apply this method in terms of looking at the likelihood, the impact, the threat and vulnerability, and then hence calculating the risk. So simple maths, if you have the likelihood into the impact is equal to a higher number, then it's obviously a high ticket item. And there will be various such situations that you will find out that the calculation is leading you to a high number, and this number is what you use to do your calculation in terms of how you will prioritize your ticket within the organization. I'll pause here before I move forward for any questions. How do you do your levels of prioritization of ticket currently in your organization? Do you use the Lockheed Martin kill chain? Do you use this calculation in terms of high, moderate, and low? If not, my suggestion is try to look at this currently how this is done, because your metrics, which is subsequent in terms of mean time to detect, mean time to remediate, mean time to respond, mean time to recover, and the impact of any security breach will be something which will be controllable once it is done scientifically. I'm sure it has been done accordingly. Of course, these are known things. I'll skip this part and come to the incident handling process. So the incident handling process is once you identify a particular incident, and that's where Mr. Rastogi point came in. You then want to see whether it's a security incident or not. If not, you eradicate it. If there, then you classify it. Now the previous section where we were doing calculation, which is high priority, low priority, moderate, based on Lockheed Martin kill chain and the calculation of severity, likelihood of the attack, all that, then you do this classification, and then accordingly you give to your the L3 analyst. The L1 analyst is the one who is collecting these logs. L2 is processing this and seeing whether it's a false positive, true positive, priority, no priority, high, low, etc. Giving into the L3. The L3 takes it over and starts the incident triage. So he looks at, conducts various analysis, do the prioritization, classification, and then notifies the department. Any such incident will be part of a department, right? That it will be finance, or it will be marketing, or it will be administration, or it will be production, operations. So those have to be informed as well about this particular incident. Starts the containment process, gather forensic analysis. If there is a forensic department within the organization or a team, informs that, eradicates, recover, and then comes the interesting step with the Government of India guidelines. Now, once you have done this documentation, you have to inform certain, and all this has to be done within 6 hours, right? So this is where we do inform them, and if it is, which I presume sooner or later will come, is if there is another agency, let's say military, or if tomorrow it is established that such incident in critical infrastructure is an act of war and has to be informed to certain agencies, those agencies are to be informed, and the case is accordingly closed. this we know, we have all kind of tickets. We have false positive, true negative, and true positive. One of the biggest challenges for SOC is that they being flooded with false positive tickets. You don't want to be busy doing nothing, right? So you need some form of automation which comes in, which eradicates false positives and brings more true positive tickets to you. So that's where we have this process which we create in terms of an L1 analyst whose jobs is to see the various tickets that come in his direction are filtered and accordingly transferred to the L2 once identified. However, we have various new technologies available, which we'll talk in a moment, which allows you to automatically do this, because you don't want to be spending time in case sensitive situation like ransomware, looking at whether it's a true positive, false positive, and spending time by which a malware or advanced malware which is on one system spreads across a network, and you are into a situation where you have to pay ransom and lose reputation of the company as well as financial loss. This again becomes very important in a current environment. Practically, there are publications which direct all your organization will be having more than one vendor. Somebody who will be a telecommunication provider, somebody who will be a SOC provider, or managing SOC for you, somebody who will be an auditor, somebody who will be a telecom provider. The sensitive data will be flowing through all of them, right? An incident might be occurring under the accountability or responsibility of another vendor, and we have to have a proper mechanism put in place where this communications takes place. Of course, this particular incident is also having another facet, that this asset owner is going to be a department. So communication with that department also has to be established. There are scenarios where companies have their own incident response team, forensic team, or a third party separate forensic team. So those also have to be done, and the government agencies and media, if they have to be dealt with. And media becomes a very important factor in today's time. Another thing which is now, we look at the other aspects of threat intelligence. Now, the question of Mr. Rastogi becomes very important, log retention. Now what you need to do is that you have the log. If you have the logs, you have to correlate this log to get a meaningful insight out of this. And where comes in the predictive, prescriptive, descriptive analytics part of it. I was just mentioning earlier about this fact that the use case of business becomes very important. Let's say ONGC. ONGC will have different kind of users. ONGC will be having a business requirement for the refineries, for example. They will have a business case, for example, the IT and marketing, right? Which is a new element or the new elephant in the room in terms of business use cases. The marketing is trying to gather information real time for their consumers, right? Through IoT, through the sensors and all that. They're also running analytics. Their security requirements are going to be quite different. The tickets they are going to get is very different. It might be from their customers and not from, let's say, ONGC itself, right? And that ticket handling procedure and process and the volume of ticket metrics will be very different than the metrics which we are going to apply to IT, then the metrics we are going to deploy here. The threat intelligence also will vary. TPR and third-party risk will be highly in case of if there is a log coming in from third-party or OT vendors. And if you have a Schneider or Yokogawa or other vendors who are also logging into the OT system, then their risk or their identity theft is also going to compromise you. So we need a threat intelligence coming in from here. So then becomes a very interesting thing. You need the industrial intelligence, you need the regional intelligence, you need deep dark web, what is happening into LinkedIn, what is happening into Facebook, etc. You need intelligence of what is happening with your information, where it's getting sold. And you get it from central intelligence team, from certain, etc. And then you need user intelligence, right? The social media intelligence of the users, what's happening, etc. And then you need intelligence, which is the most important. A lot of research and new bots and new malware are getting developed, and a counterfeit for that is not getting developed by companies which we know typically. Right? They are not getting developed in the labs of the OEMs per se, while some of them are. It's getting developed in academias. So there are tools which are able to do research on what is the research and a kind of antidote getting developed in academia, and that research paper is applied into finding out what kind of malware or advanced malware you can, or a zero-day attack you are going to factor with. There are intelligence tools which are also available for that. So an amalgamation of all of this has to come in. And if we bring in further, if 60% of the attack is from insider, and that insider has a digital footprint, that insider has BOID device, that insider has this susceptibility for social engineering attack, that is your weakest link. And you have to look at intelligence coming from those elements as well. So cyber threat intelligence helps us in terms of our respond and recover capability. We can prepare, we can create an hypothesis. Rather than reactively looking at incident, we can create an hypothesis. If you know that his account is compromised, right? So that intelligence has come to you. You're also gathering his logs, right? So now you have a tool called identity and access management, and you can bring adaptive authentication or access for him. So you can reduce his access. If he's a privileged user, apply the principle of least privilege, right? And possibly move from RBAC, role-based access, to discretionary-based access for those users. So apply different principle for those users based on the threat you get. And then, of course, you can do threat hunting, right? Now that you have some information of some malware. I know, I was serving a customer when WannaCry happened, and by the time we got the information, we started looking at what are the patches we had to look for. Right, so we started detecting those patches and updating those patches. Of course, we also found out intelligence in terms of what are the files we had to look at, and this was a global organization, so we had to scan the environment for much larger things. So with threat intelligence, we can do a lot of proactive detection, and then of course, based on this, we can ensure the protection is there within the organization, update our signatures, and so forth and so on. Another element that comes in with this capability is hunting, right? And they're done with various forms. You have the EDR, which is the endpoint detection response, NDR, network detection response, where you have a module which is looking at advanced malware. Once identified a malware, you're looking at across for that particular behavior. And if it is a zero-day attack, you're looking for that vector within the whole environment and protect your organization. So threat hunting becomes a very important element. This again, you can develop a hypothesis within the incident response team and start looking for that hypothesis before it hits your organization. If you found out that your similar industry has got an attack, let's say Oil India, and you had a proper case study on finding out that Revil had taken the accountability, what kind of malware is, you can create that hypothesis and then do a threat hunting with the tactics and procedure, TTPs, which are being used in that particular case, and do an analysis out of it. So that's another use case, a proactive use case a SOC can have. A lot of people have it, the EDR, and they have various versions of EDR now, endpoint detection and response. One of the things which is been able to do, and some of my customers in the past, they stopped using SIM tools with this tool. They only use this. Why? Because the L1 analyst I was talking about earlier, who was supposed to identify what kind of malware it is, now that thing is done automatically by this. So it becomes an Uber model, no human intervention. Now this guy would have taken half an hour, 45 minutes to identify what kind of malware it was. This will automatically, with machine learning, detect that malware, inform this is Peta virus, this is WannaCry in this machine. Automatically, as a playbook, you can define that it starts doing threat hunting and start looking across the network for that malware. So L1 gone, L2 gone, L3 gone. Incident response process, the only thing which comes in after that is forensic. So 4 steps gone. The same thing which would have taken an hour or so, etc., would have been done in minutes. And that whole situation was somebody taking over your network and asking for ransom, it became a big news and embarrassment for that organization and for the company and the country, can be avoided. So this is one key element, not just for endpoints, but for SOC, for an effective SOC. Another element which becomes very important is the speed by which you can respond, and how how often and how fast you can create new playbook, which is possible by SOAR, Security Orchestration Automation Response. Now it does three things which are very, very important and are very critical for modern day SOC to be an effective SOC. One, what it does is that it automates the whole process of how your SOC is. It further makes it Uber, right? No human interference. It automates the playbooks once they are defined. So all repeatable tasks, which are, where the ticket will go to L1, which I mentioned earlier, the whole second thing will go to L2 once the L1 has decided it is false positive or not. And in doing that, he would have spent considerable time. Because before he found a ticket, which was a security ticket, he would have spent an amount of time in non-security tickets to validate whether they were not or not. They were security incident or not. Now this whole process is gone. This SOAR will automatically give him the right tickets. In fact, he doesn't even have to identify the right ticket, it directly takes it to the L2. Now, this coupled with the previous step of EDR further takes out the L2 and L3 as well. So this is one functionality and brings down the time, a mean time to detect and mean time to respond will come down by 70 to 80%. The second thing which it does is that it creates new playbooks. Now you can have playbook created day 0, which has 30 different scenarios in which indicator of compromise will be looked at. But then things have changed, new malwares have come, new kind of TTPs have come. This particular tool will update that incident playbook. The fourth thing is, remember I talked about log collection and 60% of attack coming from insider and all that. Now let's say all of this will be belonging to some department. They will be belonging to some department. They will be belonging to some region. How do you get dashboards? You need dashboards to see which department is creating a lot of incidents. The department itself want to know where is the incidents coming from, what kind of malware incident they are coming from, which is the part of the country where the incidents are coming from, how much time it took to create a breach, how many times such incidents have reoccurred after the incident has been, so that you don't have a metric. So the third and most important thing which SOAR does is give you a customizable dashboard. A lot of the departments will require or regions will require. You will have the central office will have an overall dashboard, but authorization wide, let's say east, north, west, will have separate access for their only region. And OT might have a separate access and might not have the visibility to IT, or one site might not have the access to the other site. All that combination, splicing and dashing is possible with security orchestration automation response, and it's an element which is very important. Now coming in, if 60% of the attacks are from insider, it becomes very important to monitor those attacks, right? How do you monitor? The antivirus, email, firewall, they are only looking for malware, they are not looking for insiders, right? And then comes in UEBA, User Enterprise Behavior Analytics. Now they are at various places, right? These are UEBA is happening at endpoints. The UEBA is happening at your network infra also, because humans are involved there also. Something can happen there as well. The UEBA is also involved in OT. So there are various modules of UEBA. What can be the challenges a user can do apart from security breach? He might breach your compliance, right? So you also want to do compliance monitoring. Whether somebody is following compliance, they require regulatory compliance, which are there any breach in those compliances. You can set those baselines, right? And then do the analytics. So this is where this thing comes very, very handy. This coupled with the previous slide on UEBA and the previous slide on EDR becomes a very lethal tool, bringing in completely robust solution without any human interference or any form of not just interference but human bias or negligence possible in terms of because a vendor might want to not show them in a bad light and compromise or not show some incidents because there might be a conflict of interest. But this will be bypass all that nuances or the low level nuances which can happen in a kind of conflict of interest situation as well. So that's the other part. Now coming to Madam's question. Once you go in cloud, you have platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, software as a service. This is a completely different world. All the security solutions which we had for our old school of thoughts, which were antivirus, DLP, email security, they're not applicable here. There are different class of solution providers which are here now, and the things you have CASB, CSPM, CWP, and then Gartner started with CASB quadrant, leader quadrant, then they have merged all this because they realized that all these three are important elements. So you want to look at your Office 365, but that Office 365 is belonging to Microsoft. What if Microsoft is compromised? So you need to look at regular auditors. You have the NIST special publication 800 SP 800-100 and other publications which are meant to look at cloud service provider security. And other thing is, before this data was residing in Office, you had all the controls. Now the cloud provider might not have all the controls. So they might ask you, go to the marketplace and buy these controls or subscribe to these controls. Again, an assessment has to be done. So cloud security posture management, cloud workload protection. So cloud security posture management for this area, cloud workload protection. Now, once your applications are on cloud, right, those also have to be secure. Now, if those applications are also getting developed within your organization and you're downloading them in bots, right, then there is a separate level of security that is required there. So this whole package, and then we might be using various security solutions. We might be using Salesforce apart from Office 365. You might be using SAP or other applications. Now, they are also on cloud. They might be software as a service, they might be platform as a service. And that security also comes into the component because they are not in your control. But it cannot be just because of the reputation of the cloud provider, you think it is there. You still need to audit and find out if there is any vulnerability. And you have to have logs of that. So this becomes another element, these solutions. They also complement, because now what was happening when I was talking about somebody able to send data on Office 365 to OneDrive or his personal OneDrive? We had a governance non-compliance. This also has to be monitored. Now this indicator of compromise and use case and playbooks was not available or not applicable in the world before this, which was Lotus Notes or Outlook. But it is applicable as soon as you move to Office 365. So this becomes another element. These are the various controls. There are so many controls which you are doing, and security monitoring or SOC is, compliance is not equal to security. There are two different things. Compliance is a separate thing you have to monitor in SOC. So SOC has two roles. One is security monitoring. The other is compliance monitoring. So you will have your whole set of compliances which are there. In terms, let's say tomorrow Parliament of India, just last week the Indonesian Parliament passed the data privacy bill. Now, data privacy bill says 6 years of imprisonment and the whole assets will be confiscated by the government. And in other countries, if you are in oil, gas, or any healthcare companies, there will be HIPA, NERC, and also many compliance. And there are regulatory compliance. That means they have implications. So you have to monitor for them, right? And sooner or later we will have some of them as well. The bills are there, so you have to monitor for them. And some of our organization might be dealing with companies who might be their customers, which will require you to follow those compliances. So that has to be monitored. And all the security which we have discussed in past hour or so also has to be monitored. And then an indicator of compromise have to be created for both. So there is an evolution of SOC maturity that has happened. Most SOCs are rule-based SOCs, which are low reactive SOCs, low on correlation. There is no automation, right? And all that thing which I talked about, SOAR, UEBA, and all that, threat intelligence doesn't exist yet, right? Then you have this transitional SOC, where we do have correlation, rule-based. You have siloed database, and that is a big thing I see in most organizations, where the infra and the data application, and some even don't take logs from applications. They just have logs coming in from infra and endpoints, and that they believe is SOC. And even they are not correlated. So they have to be correlated because, if you have a big house with big doors, you lock the doors, keep the windows open, you still have a chance of breach, right? So you have to lock everything. So these are partially automated, and then you have to go further in terms of analytics based, where you have predictive. The SOC should be able to give you predictive so that you can have hypothesis creation and looking at threat hunting based on those hypotheses. Prescriptive, telling you what are the possible vulnerabilities so that you can bring down the excess of those employees. And these are all well documented, academic terms, principle of least privilege and RBAC and MBAC and all that. So you can apply those principles automatically. And there are solutions now available which can put this. And this also brings rich data, integration. Now, today I was talking with some of our colleagues or people sitting here. We have been having a lot of deliberation. Today we have IT SOCs. So data classification in terms of confidential, secret, top secret, internal, public is on IT only, right? Tomorrow you will have OT, video logs, audio logs, and other things. Now this whole thing has to be correlated from various perspectives. First is timestamp perspective. What is top secret, classified, or confidential today might not be as tomorrow. Some might be, some might not be. But this integration and this calculation has to be done, right? We have all this classification today done from an IT perspective, but a PLC generating information, right, might be a big, highly confidential information, but that classification still has to take place. And that classification further has to be coupled with whatever Government of India guidelines comes on in terms of data privacy and other things. Some countries, like say the GDPR, goes into the extent that the same day if their data is deleted, data is modified, or data is changed, has to be informed to user. Imagine if you are Indian Oil and you are serving petrol pumps, and you had brought in this particular aspect of 70%, I think the revenue comes from them from two-wheelers, right? And then the aircrafts and all that, sale and LPG. Now, any of these users, data was sitting with them, and this law, something like this law came in India, or a POPI law, which is in South Africa. Then this analytics becomes further, because humanly it's impossible to inform everybody. First of all, you need to know about that thing, right? So I'm just giving you one scenario. There will be various, so the data, enriching the data and data coming from various sources becomes very important. So another element which will come in, you have data which will be coming from various sources. Currently, we obviously have IT data. At some point, we will take our CCTV data, because it becomes very, if you look at various, guidelines in terms of security, they are, propagating that you should have the CCTV data also into the logs. Apart from audio data, apart from the PLC logs and other things which come from the OT side of it, and the sensor data as well. All this data has to be saved. Answer to that, Mr. Rastogi, in the earlier discussion. Why? Because 60% of attack is happening inside it, and if it is happening, you need to make a data lake. You need to make data lake for users, you need to make data lake for machines, you need to make data lake for logs, so that you can do contextualization. Others, there is no other, all these other tools are only looking for malware and all that stuff. Right? So if majority of attacks are from other source, then these malware, they need to find it out. And then it is correlated going up. So you have blockchain, large multinationals have already adopted this technology. It goes to a very minute level of information and can do correlation for all this. One use case is highlighted here, that if a user, an event takes place, the user comes into office, the CCTV captures it. The user further uses his access control card, which is event 2, gets into his system. So why we're trying to solve here is non-reputation. Nobody can, the biggest problem is that the person, I was not the person who was doing it, somebody else was doing it. Now blockchain prevents it. Third thing, he boots his machine, again an event. It's not become an incident yet. He again opens a confidential data, right, and takes a picture, which is captured. Now this becomes an incident. Now in today's case, this will be a non-reputation issue, because how do you know this person was there? But you correlated the data event which is coming from CCTV, his access card, his machine booting, and from the software which is on this system. Now it is an incident. So there will be, this is one use case. There are various different use cases which will come in with this. Another big element is the DevSecOps part, the threat modeling, where you say that what you have to look out for at the the plan stage, right? Define and integrating the policies, integrating the governance part of it. Now, once you've done this and the code start, there will be another element which is a common abuse case from the past. You'll also integrate this. Now, what is happening is you are feeding into the incident monitoring team what they have to look for. Now if I define, I'm using Git or GitHub, right? And I'm doing branching. The same code is worked in Bombay, Bangalore, Delhi and other places by the different developers. And I have identified the version control system, right? The developer 1 is working on what version, developer 2 is working on another version, 3 is and the final version has to come in. Now there's a deviation in the branching. That's another, because this is not what your normal SOC is going to look for indicator compromise. Because this branching can also have an implication on the code, right? Why we're doing all this? Because we don't want to do the whole testing at the end of the development. We want to do it while it is getting developed. Third, the bot is getting downloaded. Now this is where the cloud cloud workload protection comes in. Now what if the cloud provider is compromised and the container is compromised and the bot is infected? So bot is coming in at the build stage. So then you have to scan for the container itself at that stage where you're downloading this for, and this is again an indicator of compromise. And then at the build stage, you have a disgruntled employee or somebody whose identity is stolen. Now these developers are not security people. These are developers, right? But DevSecOps, CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous development, ask for developers security happening at every stage, right? Now you bring in another element, train the trainer. Now you have a person who is going to identify whether it's a logical, genuine mistake a guy is making, or his account is compromised, or disgruntled employee who is actually infected. So another use case, another indicator compromise, right? And then you come into the third stage where you're now looking at statistical analysis, where you're looking at the code level, dynamic analysis with the environment level, fuzzing. Now you're looking at fuzzing where you're doing what an adversary would have done to you and seeing whether it is there. And runtime application security testing, iterative application security testing, and then do this thing. And then bring in your various teams. So this is another use case which will be there. And you're also, apart from the software, you're also going to look at the environment, because this environment will be outside your network. This might be an AWS environment, which you also have to scan for. This might be a GitHub, Jira environment, which you have to also look for. This might be the servers or the containers itself. Some companies might be using the container all through the process. Some companies will be using container at the pre-production or the production stage, right? But again, a different use case which comes in application as again infra. So from an OT perspective, we have another, this thing that an OT environment can be also infected from various sources. This can be right from the IT part of it or to a third party part of it, and that also has to be secured. So IT/OT security becomes an essential element in this particular whole thing, and we need to ensure that we have right solutions and logs collecting. Currently, as per a survey conducted by SANS, 90% of companies worldwide do not have visibility what's happening in OT. First thing, we need to get visibility on what is happening at PLCs, RTUs, etc. So this is another element. An IT/OT SOC is essential, and IoT is another element. A lot of people we know are managing their OT machineries through smart handheld devices, which are connected to sensors, and those sensors again, those handheld devices again require security controls. I've been visiting a lot of sites and seeing printers also connecting to the same switch. And somebody hacking the printers can also get into the PLCs. So the biometric system, the surveillance systems, security logs also becomes as important. Identity access management, we typically have been looking at identity access management of IT people, right? But we need to look at the blue-collar people who are working in the plants as well. So their identities also become as important, as do the importance of bots and machineries. And of course, application, I was sounding a last slide that it has a different use case as against the network, endpoints, and data and cloud. The endpoint is also got completely disrupted with cloud. So the use cases, the indicator of compromise, and the tools itself which we're going to use are quite different, because you have Office 365 and all that which is there. And then because that has happened, the firewall switches, which are the physical firewall and switches which are sitting in office, are completely redundant. So you have software as a firewall and all those tools which are now available, which have to be brought in, and the logs coming in accordingly. So I'll just skip this. I'll just skip this as well. This becomes very important, the metrics. A lot of people I talk to, when they say we have an SLA, and SLA is with this company. And when we discuss in granularity what is the mean time to detect, mean time to respond, mean time to recover, and all that, and what is the acceptable and lower range and higher range, that is missing. That becomes very important that we have them. Another is SANS conducted a survey some time back to look at what are the other metrics beyond MTTR, MTTD, and so forth and so on. The one important part was repeatability of an incident. If an incident has been mitigated and it continuously perpetually reoccur, that means that the quality or the incident response on papers is containing the metrics or taking care of the metrics of MTTD, MTTR, but in reality it is not getting eradicated. Second is the exposure in terms of the loss company has made. Even if an incident is resolved, what is the impact in terms of losses the company has to suffer? So those are some important aspects. Other thing, as I started in the beginning, SOC is not about one thing or it's not about a solution on its own. It has to be a holistic thing. It has to be across organization. It should cover confidentiality, integrity and availability, compliance, privacy and governance, and safety in case of IT and OT. And it has to be a comprehensive viewpoint. Eventually the expected loss for forecasted is very high in terms of security breaches. And with that I will end my presentation and open to any questions.